most people believe that Jezebel was the most wicked queen in the Bible. Let me shock you. There is another queen, in my own opinion, whom I believe is even much more wicked than Queen Jezebel. Yeah. And you know how it is said that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's exactly how it is. Because that queen of wickedness is none other than Queen Athaliah, the daughter of Jezebel. In fact, it's like wickedness runs in the bloodline in that family. Because do you know what the Bible said about King Ahab, the father of Queen Athaliah that we want to talk about today? The Bible said there is none other king who gave himself to work much wickedness like King Ahab, like he was working wickedness with both hands, whom Jezebel, his wife, spurred on. Do you know what that means? The man was wicked on his own, but then Jezebel, his wife, was also spurring him on to be more wicked and do much more wickedness. And that is not all. Do you know that the grandfather of Queen Athaliah, that's the father of Ahab, the king, he was also recorded as a very wicked king in the land of Israel. That's Omri. The Bible said he did wickedly. He was much more wicked. In fact, it's a... Alright, you know what? Let's backtrack. Let's start from where let's go back. Let's backtrack. Let's go back to where it all started. You know what I like to do? I like to give you the background of the story so that you understand. All right. So there was a king in the land of Israel. Oh, you all know David. We talked about David in the last story, right? Every time you talk about kingship in Israel, you always have to talk about David. So David later became king, and he was a very good king. After his death, Solomon, his son, became king. But one of the principles that God gave for the kings in Israel is that, number one, they must not multiply wives. Number two, they must not marry women who are not Israelites. Now, if you know the story of King David and King Solomon very well, you will know that they broke that rule. They multiplied wives and they married from people that are not Israelites. Because of that, there were issues in their, David had ladies problem. David was a ladies man, and so his family was not very settled. He committed adultery with Bathsheba. I don't know if you know that story, but David committed adultery with Bathsheba. He killed her husband, and then he took the woman, and then she became his wife. God was very angry. God told David that the sword will not depart from his house, and a lot of things began to happen. But Solomon, David, actually became king. Solomon, as you know it, he multiplied wives. And the Bible recorded that when Solomon became old, his wives turned his heart against the Lord. And because of that, God said he was going to punish him. He would not remove the kingship totally from the lineage of David, because there's a covenant relationship that David had with God, but God was going to punish him. God was going to take some of those kingdoms from his hand. That kingdom would be divided. And so in the days of Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, Rehoboam was one of the most foolish kings in the land of Israel. He was the son of the wisest king who turned out to be very foolish. And so in the days of Rehoboam, the kingdom was split. And when the kingdom was split, Judah stayed with the lineage of David, and Israel, 10 tribes went away, 2 tribes stayed. So out of 12 tribes, 10 tribes went away, and 2 tribes stuck with David. 2 tribes stayed with David. So that is how we had the kingdom of Judah and we had the kingdom of Israel. Now, in the kingdom of Israel, their kings were terrible kings. Jeroboam, he started with Jeroboam. When the kingdom was taken from Rehoboam, Jeroboam became king. Jeroboam was a terrible king. And on it went like that till it got to Omri. Omri was the patriarch in the lineage of Athaliah. Omri was the grandfather of Athaliah. And when Omri was king, he was a very wicked king. After he died, Ahab, his son, became the king. Now Ahab, I told you before that one of the principles that God gave that is that the kings in Israel, number one, they must not multiply wives. Number two, they must not marry from people who are not Israelites. The reason why they are not allowed to marry people who are not Israelites is because all those nations in those days, they don't know God. It was only Israel that was serving the true God. And you know that a wife has serious influence on her husband. So God knows that if any of those kings marry a woman that is not an Israelite, there's a possibility of her turning his mind against the Lord and turning him into idolatry, like it happened with Solomon. But did Ahab learn his lesson? No, Ahab did not learn his lesson. Ahab went to marry Jezebel. Now, Jezebel was not an Israelite. She was a Sidonian princess. And in her own land, they worship Ashtoreth and Baal. And so when Jezebel became the queen in the land of Israel, she came with her own wickedness, with serious mind of idolatry. Not only did she turn her husband into idolatry, not only did she do that, she also brought the whole land into idolatry. She did not only bring them into idolatry, she enforced idolatry in the land. That was not all. She killed all the prophets of the Lord, to the extent that Elijah, the true servant of God in that land, began to feel as if he was the only one remaining. She was killing all the prophets of the Lord, to the extent that a servant of the king had to go and hide about 100 of them in a cave to be feeding them secretly. She was so full of wickedness and idolatry. The people were so confused that Elijah had to call the people and say, let's do a test. Let's know the true God of Israel, the one who is able to set fire down from heaven. That's the one we will be worshiping. And that was when it happened that Elijah called out fire from heaven. But you would think that Jezebel would be afraid of a man that called fire down from heaven. Not Jezebel. Jezebel was so bold, so full of evil, that the next thing she did, that very day that Elijah called down fire from heaven, she sent to him and said, by this time tomorrow, I'm going to sever your head from your neck. The gods do so to me and more. So if I don't do it, she put herself under an oath and swore to Elijah, the man that just called out fire from heaven, that I'm going to kill you. By this time tomorrow, I'm going to cut off your head. And so Elijah became afraid of Jezebel and he ran away. And he began to pray for death. You can imagine how dangerous Jezebel was. That was the mother of Queen Athaliah. But that's not all that Jezebel did. Jezebel set up an innocent man. Just because her husband wanted the land of that man, she set up that man to be killed. They killed the man, they lied against the man, and they stoned that man to death. But God was looking at everything. And God promised that all the male descendants of the house of Ahab will be cut off at their prime. And not only that, he also promised that Jezebel will not go unpunished, that dogs will eat her flesh, that she will not be buried, that she will die such a shameful death that it is dogs that will eat her remains, that she will not even have a befitting burial. And Jezebel was a princess. Yes, she was a princess and she was a queen. You can imagine how shameful that is. So, how did Athaliah come into the picture? Now, I told you that the kingdom was divided, and the kingdom of Judah, they were the lineage, the actual lineage of David. And they were, their kings were good kings, they were obedient, they were righteous. Most of them were like that.